of the BLOOP family seed. Many of you know about the previous seeds that I've explored before, called the Dead BLOOP, the original BLOOP, and many other versions of BLOOP, even the Godzilla BLOOP. But this version is the BLOOP family. Now, the BLOOP family is a very interesting one because the BLOOP family houses many different BLOOPs of many different shapes and many different sizes. And as you can all see and all tell, this is something that we will be exploring. So in this adventure, it was something that I enjoyed exploring, and trust me when I tell you, this adventure was not like the others, as it was much more interesting and entertaining. So of course, as I joined on the world, I managed to look around to see if I could get any inclination as to what would be nearby. I knew that there were some mods installed, but I didn't know which would relate to the BLOOP family and if they were going to give me a very interesting part to play and exactly what we were going to do. And I knew that previous explorations of the BLOOP were very interesting. My first encounter was with this strange individual. I wasn't exactly sure what he was doing, but I knew that he was standing outside some kind of facility. I kind of figured that potentially this was the new BLOOP research facility, as in previous adventures, the last time we explored a BLOOP facility, it had somehow been destroyed. At the same time, we knew that they would have rebuilt a new BLOOP research facility, so I was definitely very confused as to where it was and that this could be that very well facility. So I decided to speak to this man who was outside of the facility, and he actually remembered some of our old adventures. He said, "Thanks for destroying the old evil BLOOP," and he also mentioned many other things that I can't even talk about because it was a top secret mission. He also meant and told me that he managed to find some new amazing discoveries, which he also mentioned that they had managed to find some new amazing discoveries, which of course, like I said, I really did want to see. Knowing that we were on the BLOOP family seed was definitely something that was particularly interesting, and of course, he welcomed me in. I was truly scared because this definitely seemed like a very different kind of secret facility. It was not like the ones that we used to have when we are exploring the BLOOP. This one wasn't made out of quartz. It was much more militarized, if that is even a word, but you can see that it was made up of many different bunkers and barracks, which led me to believe when I first explored it that this was much more dangerous than original. It was also very interesting because I did believe that whatever the BLOOP was, or whatever was inside this facility, would likely be much more dangerous than I had originally expected, definitely scaring me into realizing that whatever it is that we were exploring was very, very dangerous, and I didn't exactly know exactly where the facility was. That was until I managed to see BLOOP research facility on the left hand side, and then I managed to see new discoveries found, which was definitely very, very interesting. I could see that there was most certainly something going on inside this strange world, and this scientist had the information for me. He said, "Come check it out upstairs," and I'm guessing that he was talking about this new facility. Now, like I said to you, of course, he mentioned to me that we found new versions of the BLOOP and that it was incredible. This is something that was really, really cool to me because I didn't really know how many different versions of the BLOOP there were. I only knew of one before and the one I explored recently. There was some very weird blocks and some very weird things happening in the world. And there were also some weird telecommunications devices. I wasn't exactly sure what they were doing. Maybe they were radars scanning for the BLOOP, seeing if it was nearby, seeing if it was doing something crazy. I have no idea what these devices were, but I was trying to look at them to see exactly what they could be used for. And of course, I managed to see someone who was looking at the mountain. I wasn't exactly sure, but I did ask him, and he did say, "I'm studying, please don't bother me." Maybe he was envisioning something crazy, but I was guessing that he was doing something that was very important to him as he immediately looked back through his scope. Then I spoke to this scientist and he also said, "Read this book on our latest development." I was guessing that he wanted to talk about his development of the new variants of BLOOPs, and that's exactly what he told me, that he managed to find new variants of new BLOOPs, and I was extremely excited to see exactly what these new versions were. So I decided to make sure I found out and looked at every single one. The first one I did look at was rather interesting. It was shiny, and so I decided to read the book about the golden BLOOP. And then it said these are 1 in 100 bloop and can drop 100 diamonds when killed, and are very rare to encounter. You could see that that was super interesting. Then we have a very scary devil bloop. This was definitely one of the scariest things I'd ever seen. But the book was very also interesting. It said that the devil bloop, these are the highly very dangerous. They can be activated by going in the nether dimension. So I guess this was a cross-dimensional bloop that was somehow evil. Then we had the zombie bloop. This one was super interesting too. This one had a lot of damage, was green in its look, and also had a very weird tongue protruding from its mouth. Then we opened this up, and the book itself read as follows. These are the bloop that have been infected by the zombie virus and are highly contagious that will spread to other humans. It was definitely a very interesting thing to read. Then we had what was here, which I didn't honestly know what bloop this was when I was looking at it, because it was so different in appearance from the other bloops that I honestly had no idea what to expect. But nonetheless, it was definitely still an interesting read. When I read the book, it was called the baby bloop, and it said these are the most common bloops, and there are several baby bloops here. So I decided to put the book down because I wanted to see exactly what was inside the main documentation. And this was what was written. He said, since the bloop died, many different bloop variations have spawned in. We have been paying attention, and since the death of the most common bloop is the baby bloop, which there are tons of, there were also some strange creatures near the bloop's skeleton. It was very interesting. Apparently, there were new creatures near the bloop skeleton, which I was very, very eager to explore, as I wanted to know exactly what went on. So I decided to look around and see exactly what is going on. So after looking around the base, I was definitely quite intrigued because, like I said before, this base was so militarized, if that is even a word. I was wondering if there are any actual materials that I could potentially use. I mean, if I was about to explore the bloop and potentially get killed near the bloop, I was wondering if there was any armor or any weapons that I could take for myself. So I was looking around, seeing if there was any diamond armor, any weapons, any guns, anything I could really take on that adventure. And eventually I found a small barrack right here, and it actually had a huge diamond armor. And of course I decided to equip the diamond armor because my current armor was definitely not up to scratch. There was also a chest in which there was an emerald sword, something I'd never seen before, which definitely poses the fact that whoever had created this barrack had clearly been to another dimension, and I was guessing that that is where the bloop had spawned in. So with my emerald sword, my golden apples and everything there, I decided it would be best if I could somehow explore this bloop thing. I wasn't exactly sure where it was because on the previous versions I knew always that it was somehow to the left of the base, but this time I didn't know the orientation. I just knew that the bloop would of course be in the water, so I decided to put my boat inside this little place right here and see exactly where it could go. I wasn't exactly sure where it could go, but I was sure that we would find the bloop anywhere. Now, one thing that I was definitely sure of was the fact that the bloop was here. And as you can all see, after traveling for some time, I managed to find the bloop. Now, of course, we managed to get right next to it, which was definitely scary, but the bloop, of course, was still dead. But what I was more interested in was the bloop family. Where were the other bloops that were being talked about? That was something that I wanted to see. We'd already seen the pictures, they'd already photographed them, and they were already somewhere in the world, but I needed to know exactly what was nearby. Now, of course, as you can see, I was definitely quite hesitant, but the fact that I did have a jetpack on me definitely helped out quite a ton. So I used this jetpack to go all the way up to the new version of the bloop, in which I met with another scientist. I was definitely thinking that this was the same scientist as before, but it completely wasn't. It was a different scientist from the last adventure. Then there was a chest, which was definitely very intriguing. It said, these are the collected creatures from the bloop. Then you can see right here, it said, look at this. We have never seen creatures like this before. Then you can all see what they were talking about. He then said, we managed to capture some of their eggs. And I wasn't exactly sure what he was talking about. What did you mean you managed to capture some of their eggs? Did some of the bloops leave some eggs somewhere? Were they pregnant? Were they about to have offspring and you managed to capture some of them? It was definitely very interesting. There was a lot of glass that was there, and there were a lot of spawn eggs. So I was guessing that some of these interdimensional bloops maybe had children and maybe were about to have offspring, and somehow, somewhere, these eggs had been captured. So what I decided to do was see if I could spawn in some of these crazy creatures and see exactly how they related to the bloop. So I decided to create myself a small platform and that's when I decided to do the spawning in. I spawned in one creature. I couldn't really see it, but it instantly attacked me. I wasn't sure if it was friend of the fire bloop or the zombie bloop, but it was definitely very dangerous to be in. The other creature I spawned in also did try to attack me. In fact, most of these creatures were quite aggressive, but one of them absolutely disappeared instantly, which was definitely quite scary. And as you can see, this one even jumped onto my platform and tried to attack me. I wasn't sure which bloop variation it was, but either way, it was definitely very interesting to discover more of these creatures.